Hi. Good morning, everyone. A warm welcome to the stage two of Apidays Dubai and Middle East on the day one, June 29th. We have put together a couple of sessions on the topic of how to prepare your bank for open banking. Uh, Open banking, while might be too simplistic a term, it's not just about creating creating some APIs and providing access to somebody or anybody or everybody. It goes beyond that. There are different aspects from an infrastructure or a technology point of view that needs to be looked into while preparing your bank or a financial institution for this open bank or open finance journey. So joining us first will be Mehdi Medjaoui, founder and chairman at API Days conferences, to talk to us about API, the next 10 years beyond the interface. Hi, welcome Mehdi.
Hello, Prashant. How are you doing?
Good.
Good.
Yeah.
Perfect.
You want to share the screen?
Yes, I was. Yeah, it's shared. Yeah, let's go for 25 minutes on the topic, and
Yes.
everything is good. Yeah, perfect. So we'll talk about the APIs the next 10 years beyond the interface with a kind of an overview of the API landscape, right? So this is what we'll talk about the API mindset for the next 10 years to prepare for open banking, and then how the API industry is gathering to prepare for opening, especially open banking. So a little bit about me. I'm the founder and chairman of Apidays conferences. You can follow me at Medjaoui, or you can find me on LinkedIn with my first name and last name. And you can follow or acquire my latest publication on continuous API management or API for government, or on data portability according to data protection regulations. So again, I will share the link at the end of the presentation. Don't hesitate if you want to know more about this content. The summary of what we will talk today is mostly about how we can develop the API mindset and the API management mindset for the next 10 years, right? Beyond the interface. We will see also how regulation are enforcing the publishing and the use of APIs, how it enable new solutions, especially in banking, healthcare, supply chain, and insurance. We'll talk about API security and privacy, who are now standalone product because they're part of the stack and they're a new generation of tools. We'll talk about API as a new business infrastructure and the new technical stack, and we'll see how. And we'll talk about like the latest trend about no code and low code and how today large organizations must welcome citizen developers. So let's talk about the API mindset for the next 10 years, right, beyond the interface. So we will dive into 5 main principles. The first one is that an API is as much as exposing capabilities as hiding complexity. When you open APIs, especially with open banking, you may have really complex systems. An example, banks have been designed to be closed for the last 40 years, but now we ask them to be open. That really can expose some capabilities in a way you don't want them to be exposed, right? Because banks were not prepared, or insurers were not prepared to open capabilities in publicly. So this is why an API is a design aspect. You really have to understand that APIs are as much exposing what you want to expose or hide what you want to hide. Let's take an example of a menu of a restaurant. When you go to a restaurant, you don't want to see all what the recipes the cook can do. You don't want to see all the ingredients that they have, right? You don't want to think about how to make the recipe and everything. You don't want them to bring you the ingredients and you make the recipe yourself. You want it to be cooked for you. You want it to be prepared for you. You want the recipe to be done. So the restaurant menu exposed capabilities of what he wants you to do for your better diner experience, not all what he can do. So an API, think like a menu of a restaurant. It's the selection of cooked processes or business processes you want user to have access to and pay for, right? It's not all what you can do. It's not all what you have, all the data you have. It's the selection of data you have, of the processes you have, in a way that's valuable for the user. I love this advertisement of Lego. Again, it's true with APIs, you expose capabilities as Lego bricks, like things were pluggable, composable. But every time the end user or the company consuming your APIs will see the shadow of the brick, he will see what he wants to do. If you open, for example, a weather data API to know what's, some people may do weather application, some people build an insurance because if we have sun in next week or if it's rainy, We may have different stock, we may have different staffing policies, we may have different orders. So you may need completely to change your supply chain process depending on weather. So you can, some people with weather just see, do I need to take an umbrella? Some weather say, do I need to staff people? Again, it's always the shadow of the brick that you're delivering. The second thing is that embedded is a lot stronger than to be open. And understand, with the keynotes, we've seen the term open banking versus embedded banking. Yes, the goal is not just to be open. The goal is to be embedded. The goal is to colonize every one application where it makes sense. So banking doesn't need to live only in banks applications. It should live in retail application, in travel application, in real estate application, in wedding planner application. Everywhere we will need money, payments, loans, credit, mortgage, we need to have banking embedded everywhere. And this is the history of what happens in the last 20 years on the digital space. In the 2000s, you needed the website to be, of course, digital. In the 2010s, you needed a mobile application to be mobile, of course. So that was your classic channels, web channels, mobile channels. But now you have APIs to be embedded everywhere in everybody's website or in everybody's mobile application where it makes sense. So now it's the time for horizontal colonization, multi-channel, omni-channel experience thanks to APIs. So think embedded, don't just think open. Your goal is to achieve maximum scale to be embedded everywhere. The third point is reuse is more important than use, right? It's really harder to make people reuse something that use something. And we will see that with an API, actually, you have a value, you have an interesting value of your capability in green. If the effort to reuse it in my own application is too hard, like DX means developer experience, I will never integrate your API, because if the value is 100, but I spend 150 to integrate it, I'm losing 50, right? So there's an integration overhead, integration does not happen. But if your API value is 100, but you made the work with documentation, with great developer portals, with great sandbox, with great onboarding, to make the effort to integrate it, like just 50. So 100 value, 50 of cost for developer experience, of course, yeah. Then you have a potential of integration and consumption, and then integration happens. So it's always a trade-off between the value of the capability you deliver and the cost to integrate it. Even the most valuable API capability with a really expensive developer experience to implement it, maybe less successful than an API that's really a lower value, but that's really easier to use. So think, because reuse is harder than use, but it's a lot more valuable, think always reusability and make things as simpler as possible. So just imagine also about the supply chain, this is what we've seen in the last 100 years. Car manufacturers, they don't build all the pieces. They reuse pieces of others, right? They let others build pieces for them and they reintegrate them. So that's really the goal. You have to put yourself in your customer shoes and say, okay, what are the pieces I'm delivering for my users, but what are the ones I integrate from others? And how do I orchestrate a lot of this, right? So think always in terms of supply chain. How do I specialize into what I do? How do I consume what others are specialized to do? And so if we go there, let's talk about reach. We talked earlier about web and mobile channels, right? In blue, traditional channels. But now I may have, if I'm embedded, I may have a lot of different channels, like partner integration, connected device, e-commerce, supplier, whatever, many integrations. But these channels were too costly to address before, right? It was too costly to address because as a large organization, it was really hard for me to address them one by one with a team and a product and everything. But with an API, I can actually address them all, orchestrate them all. And what may happen, because I can serve them all with APIs, right? They can come in self-service and discover what I do and integrate it. What happens is that maybe the sum of all my third-party long-tail channels are actually maybe larger than my classic channels. So this is where we talk about not just being open, but being embedded. Because if you're embedded into dozens or hundreds of channels, which have their own communities, at some point it may be bigger than your original channels. So be sure you don't miss the long tail channels, and this is what APIs are made for. The last point for the mindset for the next 10 years is like, don't think what is the best business model for APIs, but what are the best APIs for the business model. That's really key. Everybody talk about API monetization, but again, the best monetization may be to continue your main business model powered by APIs, right? So that's different. You may not have to shift business models. I love this the research from Marshall von Alstein. He's the co-author of the book Platform Revolution, but he made a research like on 10 years, and you find that companies who have B2C APIs actually make a little bit more revenues and save some costs, right? Mostly for R&D costs. Companies who have B2B APIs like open banking or embedded banking, in average, make 66% more revenues, right, and 38% more in net income. That begins to be something interesting. Companies who have strong internal APIs actually make some revenues. Again, is because when they have internal APIs, they also have B2B APIs most of the time. But they save cost up to 22%, on IT operations. So that's quite significant, even if the net income does not really increase, but let's say at least the cost reduce. The drawback of this is that with APIs, you have actually a lot of more hacking risk, right? So companies who have strong APIs have 13.5% more risk to be hacked, but they found that actually they recover faster because they have a better IT infrastructure and where things are a lot more transparent and documented. Also about company valuation, so he made a research about 20 quarter before API adoption, 20 quarter after API adoption, and he found that companies in average see a big shift in market value, a 12% market value shift at the end because of when the API shift is happening. So again, that's interesting, and it's on publicly traded companies, not just startups. It's publicly traded company over $2 billion of value. So that means really something, right? Before and after the API adoption. The main question that resides is that, is it because they were growing fast that they adopted APIs, or is it because they had APIs that they grew fast? It's a bit of both, right? It's exactly a bit of both. But again, you need to have this API mindset at some point. So to sum up this part, if you want to scale, so let's see this matrix, like people and software, internal and external. So internal people are what we call employees, right? If you want to grow your company bigger than the own walls, you need to have crowds with you, like partners, agents, brokers, whatever. But if you want to scale also internally, your people, you will put algorithm, to make decisions and augment workforce capabilities. But if you want a scale a value, right, that goes really from bottom left to top right, then it comes APIs. So external software, which is APIs are the crowd of your IT systems, right? They are able to engage larger communities to really accumulate value at scale. So think crowd, think APIs, and think what's the best business for my API for my company and how APIs can help. I really recommend you this paper, The Impact of APIs in Firm Performance, from Marshall von Alstein, and follow his work, research on APIs and value proposition and two-sided networks. So let's dive about like how these 5 concepts for the next 10 years are applying and how we can see them in the API landscape. So you need to be prepared for this landscape. So this is a landscape I've actually maintained. It's 1,100 companies on the API space, mostly API tools, that will be able to discover, and actually that enable you to build your API program. So it reminds the photo I shared earlier, right, about the supply chain. Let's be honest, but let's see how they are composed. So the first one is like what we call API lifecycle platforms, which is a large part of the landscape. The backend building tools, right, we're able to build backends for we're delivered by APIs. The API as a product or business process as a service, right? That's also another part. We have the integration platform as a service, also how to integrate third parties. And when we have the vertical API abstraction or API aggregators, where we'll see a lot of open banking, actually APIs. So let's dive into more numbers about the landscape so you understand where it's going on for the next 10 years. Actually, the landscape is worth like $174 billion of cumulative funding. It's just about funding, and you can see the lifecycle platforms are really the main key, followed by the business process as a service, right? So again, this is public funding. When companies do expenses, it does not count here. It's the public funding on so far. So what trends, for the last 10 minutes we have, what trends and strategic takeaways we can see from this landscape? First, API management has become a community leading to open source growth. Most of you are familiar with APIs and API management, that we need to manage APIs. But let's say there is a new tooling that has emerged, and actually that's growing quite fast, almost like 30% compound annual growth rate. So that's something significant. And we've seen a lot of acquisition in the past years. So every major software vendors have acquired one or few tools or API providers, API management solution features to be able to actually be able to deliver a solution at scale for APIs. But because of this acquisition, let's say there was a lack of innovation, so we've seen a new open source growth. Some company like Gravity, Kong, Nginx, Solo, 3Scale, acquired by Red Hat, Tyke, or WSO2 are actually open source and actually help to do API management at scale. So what happens after this trend? So because it's a API management community, it's a community. We will see what does that imply in the industry level. But let's explore this first trend. Like tech regulation are impacting the API industry. So you're familiar also in the Middle East, there are many regulations actually coming, especially in banking. There are different progress in Europe, in Middle East, in Southeast Asia, in Latin America, in USA. Yes, and because of regulation obliging to banks to open APIs, yes, we have APIs in banking or APIs in insurance in specific countries. We've seen also this in healthcare. Many countries are having regulation obliging to open APIs for healthcare applications, so that's also an obligation to open APIs. And we've seen also with the data protection like GDPR or CCPA or Indian Data Protection Bill or many others that oblige companies to open APIs for personal data. So again, regulation are pushing, and the trend for the next 10 years beyond the interface will be there. So just the last 3 months, just in Europe, for example, we had the new Data Governance Act. There were new data spaces, interoperability via FHIR APIs, with a standard. In the United States, there were some stuff also about the White House enable account switching by APIs. In Brazil, open insurance regulation. So again, just the last 3 months, there will be a lot of updates. So regulation will impact APIs for the next 10 years. Trend 2 is that because of regulation, now we have industry-specific solutions that are emerging. So in the landscape, you can see we have specific tools, like more than 130 tools and platforms dedicated to open banking and banking as a service. So I invite you to visit the landscape. But again, you can see that just some companies are raising money just doing for API management for open banking. Some vendors piloted some just open banking platforms in different countries. Again, industry-specific solutions are emerging, and especially one I find really interesting, like Goldman Sachs, has invested into WSO2 up to $90 million to build open source specific API management solution for finance. There is also the Open Insurance Initiative, who is run by Fouad Hosseini in Dubai. Yes, which is also a group of insurers who wanted to build standard for insurance. Yes, so as you can see, this last 3 months trend, again, many vendors are having support for healthcare or open banking. And again, the WSO2 funded 90 million by Goldman Sachs for API management. The trend 3 is really API security is now a standalone product. You're familiar maybe with the DevSecOps approach, right? The fact that you check security along the DevOps cycle. Yes, but let's say with the API security, a lot of companies are now addressing that, especially on top of API management solution. And now API security is a standalone product. So now most of the companies have an API management solution and an API security solution on top, because of the threats that API management solutions are not able to continue to follow. You can see some names here about companies who raised like a huge amount of money over the last year: Traceable, No Name, 42Crunch, Whip Security, Salt Security, and many others. But yes, just to tell you, it's really trending. Also, in the last 3 months trend from the Salt Security survey, we've seen also that up to 30% of companies are actually considering the sensitive data aspect, the personal data and privacy part of security. So let's say privacy is probably one of the next trend in the next 10 years. Some people call it privacy gateways, so APIs plus privacy. So yeah, it's also a trend that you will need to consider, especially in API tooling. Trend number 4 is that APIs are a new layer of business in tech infrastructure. And I love this quote from Jeff Lawson, founder of Twilio. He said, the world is getting broken down into APIs. Every part of the stack of a business that a developer might need to build is eventually turning into APIs that developers can use. And again, this is the same story of the supply chain. We have now thousands and thousands of APIs delivering capabilities, and the goal will be to orchestrate them at the right place. So again, there is probably, for anything you want to do, there's probably an API for that, right? A company who has built the capabilities already that is exposing it via APIs so you can consume it and integrate it. In the landscape, we've made a selection of almost 400 tools that you can discover about payments, about specific communication platform as a service, about machine learning, audio, video, e-commerce, headless CMS, search engine, whatever. So many APIs were really part of the tech infrastructure, and I invite you to discover that, like identity verification and stuff like that. And some companies have been extremely successful at being part of this infrastructure. So this is the top valuation of companies building these pieces, like payment or SMS or tax calculation or emailing. They're just part of the business infrastructure or tech infrastructure, but they are at scale. They're able to achieve outstanding value. There is also new tech infrastructure, like new open standards, like the Open API Initiative, Async API, gRPC, JSON Schema, GraphQL, many new open philosophy, architectural style or de facto standards that enable to also be part of a new API infrastructure, which is completely open. And so I love this Lego brick comparison, but again, this is a good explanation about like how let's say banking as a service can be explained. It's our friends from Open Banking Asia. Yes, and you can see like at some point, some top fintechs, top companies are just a mix of some capabilities, right, that they deliver as a product. So again, you can think APIs are Lego bricks for digital infrastructure. And the trend number 5 is the low-code aspect, right? The low-code aspect. So you may know some low-code platform like Zapier, Retool, or AppSheet, but let's say now we need to onboard what we call citizen developers, like people who are able to build application without knowing how to code. And so, for example, in the US, last 2 months, they have a no-code day. We have also some now no-code bootcamp, right? So to be business people, to know how to mix APIs, how to make business workflows, but not being able to code, right? So that's really the no-code aspect. And also some digital consultancies are now dedicated to build no-code integrations. So that's really a key. So again, this is a trend that you need to consider. It's like the citizen developer trend. So to sum up, the next year, 10 years beyond the interface, API management market is growing fast, but also becoming a community, creating new open source communities. Regulation are pushing the companies to open APIs by an that leads to specialization of solutions. Now you have solutions specialized for every industry that's regulated: banking, healthcare, supply chain, and insurance. Because of COVID, like security is even more important than before, and now it's a standalone product on top of API management. And privacy is the next wave of API tools. APIs are definitely a new business infrastructure. So always think Lego bricks as a service, like banking as a service, insurance as a service, supply chain as a service, or retail as a service with capabilities and bricks, technological bricks, orchestrated by APIs. And last but not least, citizen developers are the next API users and consumer. We don't have enough developers to sustain the digital transformation at scale in the world. We will need to onboard citizen developers, so business people, able to understand the business, able to understand APIs, and making workflow without the need to know how to code. Thank you very much. And if you, for more details, you can visit the landscape on API landscape.apiscene.io and discover the company you may want to discover. I hope it helped you to understand like next talks about like how to prepare your company, especially for open banking. But now, yes, the landscape is there, the mindset is there. So let's go for open banking. Thank you very much.